It's April of 2021. Theaters and music venues are already staging a full reopening. There's news every day about new apps that can help venues and audiences follow health and safety guidelines. And just about everyone you talk to says they have missed seeing live performances more than anything else. But I'll admit I'm very skeptical about how soon things will return to the way it was, and whether or not people actually want it to. Aside from being a lot more conscious about health and safety, I'm wondering how our tastes have changed, and what kind of stories we'll be open to hearing, in music lyrics, in movie themes, you name it. My guest in this episode may have a take on this. Joel Bassin, owner of Firehouse Theater in Virginia, is a veteran actor and artistic director with a long list of credits, and his theater company was probably the first to reopen back in June of 2020, hosting small private performances, sometimes for audiences of only 2 people. And since reopening, Joel and the staff of Firehouse have been in a constant stream of exploration to try and figure out what's working, what audiences are willing to pay for, and how much. Some of these answers will surprise you. Let's hear it from Master Yoda himself. Here's Joel. Joel, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Vinay. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you holding up in Virginia? You're not getting hit with the storms, are you?
We had it this weekend, and one of my tropes is I've been doing theater for 50 years, and I never canceled a show until I moved to Virginia 6 years ago. And since then, I've had to cancel like 7 performances. So we had a 2-show day scheduled for Saturday, sold out performances of our production of Crap's Last Tape, and the city shut down because the first ever ice storm warning for Virginia and Richmond was issued by the National Weather Service, and it shut the city down. It was a beautiful thing. It was also very dangerous to be out, but yeah, so we got it a little before, I guess it's hitting the rest of the country.
Right. Okay, good. So tell us a little bit about Firehouse Theater and about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm the producing artistic director here at Firehouse Theater. We're in Richmond, Virginia. I've been here for a little over 6 years now. I came down here from New York. And we're in an old 1908 converted firehouse. So it's a beautiful old building. And this is our 27th season, I think. And our mission is to be an artistic home, a thriving hub of creative activity, and a center for community engagement where new work is created and performed. And before I got here, I had a pretty active career. Like I said, I've been doing theater for 50 years. I started out as an actor, and I sort of bounced between academic theater, got my PhD in theater from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York, spent about 30 years in New York, grew up in Minneapolis, and started acting when I was a little kid. And then moved into directing and playwriting and eventually producing. And towards the end of my stint in New York, I was assistant professor and production manager and chair of the Hunter College Department of Theater, and also working with a lot of independent experimental downtown theater artists. And I was really fortunate and blessed to be managing director of the Wooster Group I was managing director for about 6 years, and then I was a grants manager and strategic consultant with them for another 4 years. And through them, I just learned a lot, had a lot of great experiences, and sort of found the kind of theater that I was interested in making and the kind of people, my tribe, who I enjoyed working with. And so, I produced 4 works by a great artist, Jim Findley, and worked with Cynthia Hopkins and Butch Morris, a great musician, and just a lot of very cool people. And was fortunate then to get this job and have sort of been, happily working away down at Firehouse in Richmond, Virginia, and trying to figure out how to keep things going, how to keep making theater.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's a pretty impressive resume. So tell me, what are the kinds of productions that Firehouse Theater does? It's not just theater, it's actually, you have music and you have some other things going on, right?
Right. When I first got down here, I was facing an institution with an annual deficit. And I started to just examine things. And of course, this is, it's not like a revolutionary idea, but it occurred to me as a revolutionary idea, which was I looked at things and I said, we own our own building and we're doing about 85 days of performance. So the rest of the year, we're just dark. And of course, insurance costs, utilities, whether you're open or dark, the bills keep coming in. So I thought, well, the building is an asset, but we're not exploiting it. So what we have to do is we have to just generate a lot more work. And also at the same time, since I was a newcomer to Richmond, I was meeting a lot of people. And, when you're a newcomer in a place, you see everything a little differently. And I was meeting a lot of really cool people who, like I was meeting a lot of magicians, if you can believe it. And I would say to them, where do you do your magic? And they said, well, on the street, I busk, or I get like corporate gigs or in restaurants. And I said, you mean none of the theaters in town, of which there are quite a few, present you? And they said, no. So I started presenting magicians. And then I would run into really cool musicians, because Richmond has a really big music scene. But like in many places, there's a pretty big boundaries between disciplines. So the music scene was not really part of the theater scene. So with this great guy, Ilya Grossman, who's been our music curator for the past couple of years, he started programming a lot of what I would consider world music programming. We've been doing a lot of very cool music here. And of course, that's brought in the music community. We have a dance company in residence, K Dance. We have an orchestra in residence, the VCU Health Orchestra, which is a bunch of doctors and first responders and healthcare workers who on the side, if you can believe they have any free time, play in this orchestra. And it's fantastic.
Wow, that's awesome.
And we've been doing storytelling and poetry and burlesque. There's a really active burlesque scene in Richmond. So I call it hyperactive programming. And up until the pandemic, we were doing about 200 days of performance a year.
Yeah.
So we jumped from 85 to 200. There were months where we were doing a different show every day that month. And it was really exciting. And, I also, without the amazing staff here, and we're like a staff of 4 people, they were all committed to this vision and just like me, loved being around the space and loved presenting performance. So, it turned out to, again, be something that wasn't necessarily revolutionary that I planned. It was, like often, necessity is the mother of invention. I just need to find a way to generate revenue. And my formula was artists generate energy that attracts audiences. And so I just needed to, and fortunately I had all those pieces around. I just needed to put them all together. And so that's what we've been doing up until the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's worked out to be, a pretty good arrangement for everybody. So we're an artistic home to a lot of artists and people who don't have a place to perform. And we're exposing audiences to sort of things that they would not normally be able to see because it wouldn't be presented in a theater that they would go to.
Right. So do I understand this correctly, that you were the first theater in the country that returned to live performances?
I think I'm not gonna, I can't swear under oath, but we started presenting in-person theater in like the beginning of June. And there were a couple other theaters because we were featured in a New York Times article by Michael Paulson about, Broadway is closed, but the show goes on. And he featured some work that was happening outside primarily. And it was also after we had this production of The Picture of Dorian Gray running for about 3 weeks, I think. What I know is that the only theater that I could find being referred to when I Googled, live theater tickets, there was a there was a sit-down production of Phantom of the Opera, I think, that was in Singapore, that had found a way to continue doing in-person live performances. But I'm pretty sure that, you know, we were among the first. And it was, again, sort of like a happy accident. We had planned on doing this one-person version of The Picture of Dorian Gray a couple of years ago, and then our director had a massive stroke, so we had to postpone it. And she fortunately and amazingly, miraculously, recovered completely and was ready to direct. And so it was going to be part of our season in the summer anyway. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like we talked. It was the actor Billy Christopher Maupin, who was also the adapter, and it was essentially a word-for-word verbatim performance of Oscar Wilde's novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, all performed by a single actor, Billy Christopher Maupin. Shirley Kagan was the director. And we talked, you know, because we've been working on the text and the design and everything. We had a great design team since before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, we said, well, should we still do this? And it's like, well, yeah, let's keep plugging away, and if we can, let's do it. And we came up with this idea that we were going to tape everything. So we were doing Zoom rehearsals and we were recording them all, because we thought, well, if we can't perform, we'll still have content that we can push out. And then as we got close, we pushed the opening by a couple of weeks, because I think originally we were scheduled to open at the end of May, and it didn't feel like that made sense. It was still, the pandemic was still too hot. But in early June, I'm going to take credit for it. I mean, I'll give credit to anybody, but I think as the producer and the venue operator, that I said, you know what, let's just do performances for 2, 4, 6, or 8 people. And Shirley and Billy Christopher said, all right, if that's okay, we'll do it. And people would ask, why 2, 4, 6, and 8? And my answer was, because I know that some people will come if they're the only couple in the theater. They'll be willing to take that chance. There are other people who may want to come with another couple or 2 of their friends. Maybe they're in a pod together. And we went to 8 because we have 4 bathrooms. And I figured we'll get 4 couples. We'll be able to assign them each to their own bathroom. And there's, our space is laid out in a way that I thought we can keep 8 people really physically distant. And we'll be able to keep them far enough away from the stage so that the actor is safe. And so that's what we did. And we ran it for 37 or 38 performances, which is a really long run in Richmond. And we were sold out, I think, before we opened. And the people who came were, the thing that I'll always remember is how grateful they were. Partly it was they were just, it was the beginning of cabin fever, where people were just so crazy that they just needed to get out. But secondly, what I found was that there were some people, the people who came to The Picture of Dorian Gray anyway, who need theater in their lives. They felt like they weren't alive. And we were certainly the only theater option in Richmond, Virginia then. And so we had a really successful time, and we learned a lot. And we were also streaming some of those performances, but only as live streams. And so we invested a lot of time and money in getting 2 cameras and some sound equipment, and learning a lot about how challenging it is to stream a production that's created for a live audience. And being a small organization with not a lot of resources, our first stream of The Picture of Dorian Gray was a disaster. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And then, over the course of that run, we bought better cameras. And like I said, we learned a lot. And so now our streams, we just got a review from Jerry Williams, who's a local critic And he does short reviews, and he gives a star rating, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. And he gave a scathing review to the stream of The Picture of Dorian Gray, and he gave it a 1. And it generated a lot of social media chatter because people were saying, hey, why are you beating these people up? At least they're trying.
Right.
And he had an interview with me, or I did an interview with him for a radio show he does. And I said, I completely agree with you. It was a disaster. But that's, we're doing this Samuel Beckett show now. And one of the lines that I mentioned in my curtain speech, which I'll read for you now, is, and it's one of my favorite Samuel Beckett lines, and it's been appropriated by different groups, but it's from Worsted Hoe, and it's ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And that was always our, mantra of like, well, we're just going to keep plugging away at this. And so now our streams, so he gave us a scathing review for the Picture of Dorian Gray stream. He recently, like this past Sunday, watched the stream of our production of Krapp's Last Tape and said that it was one of the, excellent production values and a great streaming experience. So we've learned a lot and we've improved a lot. And so, I guess from my point of view, I'm a performance maker, and so I don't shy away from a challenge or risk. I charge at it, I embrace it, and this has been a really big one. So, I often think, had the pandemic not shown up, I would have kept rinsing and repeating the model of this hyperactive programming that we had been doing at Firehouse, and everything would have been fine. But after a couple more years, maybe, I think I would have gotten bored. It's just, so, I love the artists. I love being here and seeing audiences, and I love all that stuff. But maybe the pandemic is my fault. I might be the butterfly effect, Vinay, where I was just getting to that point where I was going, I feel comfortable with this model we've created. So something needs to happen to shake it up. And lo and behold, COVID-19 shows up. And so we have been actively sort of solving problems and facing challenges and overcoming things and learning new stuff. I'm usually I'm the camera person on the close-up camera. I've done video documentary stuff, and I was a producer, an associate producer on some independent films, but I'm not a movie guy. I don't even like it. I'm a theater guy. But all of a sudden now I'm going, oh yeah, this is like running a spotlight. I got to follow the performer, and I've got to sort of frame it correctly. So I've been learning that, and it's every day I come in, it's like, okay, what's going to happen today, or how do we sort of move forward? And so it's been a sort of inspiring and very positive experience for me in the midst of this horrible nightmare and all the misery and the tragedy that this pandemic has caused. But I think that as an institution, we're strong and stable, maybe stronger and stabler than we were before the pandemic. And, artists are very flexible and fluid. And because of my background with experimental performance, that's sort of my, orientation anyway, is, you got to be like a ninja. I look forward to the time when I don't have to wear a mask and when we sort of can go back to being safe with each other. But, I think we found, again, necessity was the mother of invention. And like before in our, version of hyperactive programming, we found this sort of, COVID safe, contactless, severely restricted audience capacity thing with solo shows. And it's been, a valid experience to me.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure for those smaller audiences, it was a fantastic experience, very personalized and very intimate. How does that change the dynamic for you and for the performers?
It's really been, again, a learning curve when, the impulse for actors in a small audience that isn't giving them a big feedback loop is like a comedian tapping on the mic and going, is this thing on? Is there
Hmm.
anybody out there? And they tend to push and get, they just get uh, louder usually, right? They get heavier, they push. And Billy Christopher, during the first performance of The Picture of Dorian Gray, was sort of getting depressed by not sensing the audience. And we talked a lot about it. And um, I, my note to him was, you know what? Do the opposite. Get soft. And it turned out that that was the key to everything. That then the audience leaned in. And also, it was the perfect content because The Picture of Dorian Gray, we were trying to reproduce what it would be like to read a novel. And, if not for the pandemic, we would have probably had sold out houses and it would have been a hugely different thing. Um, but because we were doing the show for 2 or 4, or 6 or 8 people, and mostly 2 and 4 people in the early part of the run, it was, and we separated couples when we were doing that show. We said everybody's going to be physically distant. So everybody was having a very individual, intimate experience, like you said. And by bringing everything down as the performer, it turned out it was perfect. And I think that, I think that Billy Christopher's experience by the end of the run was that he had a very different, a not normal performance experience, but that it was a valuable thing to add to his toolkit, so that next time he's doing a show and he's not getting anything from the audience, maybe instead of going big, he'll go small, and maybe that's the key. We've applied that note to this other shows we've done, and it seems to be proven true. Don't know what would happen if we had a full house and you went, soft, but in our space particularly, because it's a very intimate space and it really loves the sound of the actor's voice, it works. And also, Vinay, it's because we often, the media is covering a lot of sort of that we're so used to, we spectacle and the loss of our attention span. And it's because you don't really need to pay attention if it's this giant thing that's just being thrown at you, or surrounds you. You have to pay attention, though, when somebody whispers. And I'm going to mention Jim Findlay again, just because he is a hero of mine, and a model for me. Is he directed and designed an opera piece by David Lang, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning composer and librettist. And it was done at Lincoln Center. It was called the Whisper Opera. And it was a beautiful thing. And as the title suggests, it was an opera, but the singers, I think there were 4 performers, whispered. And, the audience was spread out around the space, and there were these little sort of platforms where the performers performed. But it was like a holy and a magic experience, because we just are so used to so much noise that when you get to a place of silence or very soft quality of noise, it reaches, at least for me, it reaches me on a different sort of level, and it opens me up in ways that I'm not used to. So, and like you said, the audiences, besides being just so grateful that they were able to get out of the house and have theater back in their lives, they said, like you mentioned, that they felt like it was the most intimate theater experience they'd ever had. One lady in particular, and she's come back to see every one of our shows, the thing she said really struck with me. She said, I felt like he was performing just for me.
Mhm.
And it's like, wow. because I mean, I've been at big music concerts where you go, oh yeah, Bob Dylan was looking at me on that line. But of course he isn't, right? And nor was Billy Christopher looking at this woman audience member, but the feeling of that, whether it's a big show or a small show, that's what you go for, to make that contact with, something that you can't even describe. So I think that happens more in these sort of severely restricted, one person shows that we've been doing. And so it's been a really great thing.
Right. So now let's imagine, hopefully soon, but within the next 1 or 2 years, things return back to normalcy somewhat. How do you think you'll continue on with these types of shows?
There are some shows that just are not going to attract a big audience, right? So instead of me worrying about that anymore, I'm going to go, well, we're just back to the fun of, the severely restricted audience experience. So it'll, as a personal thing, it will relieve me of that sense that I always have to fill the house, that I have to sell every seat. What we found is that, financially, if we can break even on, controlling costs and with one person shows, and especially with new material that we don't have to pay licensing fees or royalties for, we can put a show up for, $3,000 to $5,000. And, and if we run it for enough performances for a small audience, we can cover those costs. So it's financially possible to include those sorts of shows in a season mix that also includes, big popular musicals that we're going to be able to charge higher prices for and sell out. So I think that, what I guess I'm learning is, or relearning, is that the advantage of having a space and a season that's active is, you can balance out, riskier things that aren't going to attract as big a public with the, more popular things. And, the big hits cover the losses. And so it goes back to Samuel Beckett's quote of, it's all just degrees of failure. I mean, it's not like we're making millions of dollars or winning a Tony Award or anything like that. We're just, we're hanging on. And so, it's like, so what I think happens for the institution and for me, we just have to remember that there's other sort of values other than, a Boffo box office that can be achieved by these small capacity shows. For the audience, it's and for content, it's really a big question mark. What I said, I did an interview with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and my feeling right now is I don't know if an audience is going to be interested in going back to like a fourth wall, unit set, naturalistic play that tells a linear story. And I say that because, I mean, I think there'll be an audience for that stuff, but I think that theaters and, the hardcore theater audience will want something else. They'll want something that has relevance to their lives post, living through this nightmare.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And what we know now, we always knew it, but like what sort of Beckett and the theater of absurd was dealing with after World War II, and this sort of loss of religion and this loss of belief that everything would work out, and also of our viciousness towards each other after a world war, is what we know now is that we're just like random blemishes on the universe, and no, and we have to think of more things than just ourselves. We have to take care of each other. We have to take care of our planet. At what point, I don't know about you, but when I see old movies now and people go in for hugs and kisses, I go, ooh, what are they doing? I don't know how long that fallout is going to last, But I do remember the days when, a standard piece of stage business was you'd go and light a cigarette and smoke it, or you'd get a drink.
Hmm.
Plays are not being written anymore with people smoking or drinking. It's just not, it's taboo sort of. And so will hugging and kissing and standing close to each other or whispering in somebody's ear, will that become an old stage convention, or will we accept it? I don't know. There's a lot of question marks, like I said. So I think, the other thing that this whole experience has taught me is, again, you just got to be agile. So we don't know. So we'll find out and we'll adapt, and then something else will change and we'll adapt to that. And, keeps it interesting.
That's a really interesting point you make about proximity and how that might be viewed differently in the post-pandemic world. And certainly I can relate it to this. I've noticed that my own taste in movies has changed quite a bit since I've been home and not been able to go out and experience the kinds of things that I like. I kind of look for movies that were made prior to cell phones and prior to CGI, and where I can see people like trying to find a payphone or having to get directions from someone and writing it down, that sort of thing. It just seems in a way more pure. Would you agree?
Yeah, and you hit on it, which is like, what kind of stories will we be attracted to, right? That's always been the question. And we also know that, those tastes change, that and that they're usually pop for the good, right? That they result in artists finding new languages or learning new, applying narrative in a different way. And, they tend to happen with generational change, not with, pandemics, but, we're also going through a big generational change. So, this may be an interesting mix that's going to pull the rug from everything that we sort of are used to, and that's sort of, that we can do sort of with one eye closed. And I think that that's good for art, to sort of have the rug pulled out from it every now and then, because it requires us to figure out a new way to say what we want to say and connect with people.
Absolutely. Wow. That's powerful stuff. You want to talk a little bit about the productions you're doing now and what people can look forward to?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we've got 4 more performances of Samuel Beckett's Craps Last Tape, which has just been a joy for everybody involved. And it's performed by a great actor, Alan Sater, and a great director, James Ricks. And so it's turned out really well. And we also have Fires in the Mirror coming up in March and April. And again, it's our model of a one-person show. This Fires in the Mirror is a play by Anna Devere Smith about the Crown Heights riots. And it's about race and identity and representation. And it's a beautiful play. Tickets are available on our website, firehousetheater.org, both live performances at Firehouse, and I think we're doing live streams of 4 of those performances. We continue to talk about adding some, solo or duet or small combo music concerts in the mix, but we haven't said anything now. Best place, to check is our website, firehousetheater.org, or our Facebook page where we post stuff. And very often, we're a pretty dynamic place, so things sort of just appear, and then we go, okay, let's do that next week. So it's not like anybody's missing out by not seeing anything. It's just that that's the sort of way we operate, and even more so in this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So once again, that is firehousetheater.org. I think people need to come and check it weekly, because it sounds like you might be creating something spontaneously you haven't even thought of yet, and it could appear next week, right?
Yeah, when do you want to do something?
Well, we'll see. Well, Joel, it was great talking with you. Really interesting exploratory conversation. What is this going to look like? How will the story change? How will audiences change? It's a big question. And I think you've shed a little bit of light on that.
Well, I enjoyed talking to you, Vinay, and maybe one day we can see each other in person. And I hope you'll stay in touch and, check out some of our stuff and keep me posted about what else you got going on.
Oh, absolutely, we will. And yeah, I am definitely going to drop in on a couple of your performances. I'm very curious now to see what you guys are doing. So
Great.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you, Vinay. You take it easy.
You too.